Great.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's art salon featuring Claire Watson, hosted by Guildhall's own Casey Deline. My name is Anthony Madonna, and I'm the Patty Kenner Fellow in Arts Education here at Guildhall. I want to walk you through the structure of today's art salon and talk to you a bit about how to use the interface. So Claire and Casey will chat with each other for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we will open for a Q&A session. Now, throughout the talk, if you have any questions for me, or if you want to ask Claire and Casey a question in the immediate, simply write in the chat function. Now, if you're on a laptop, as I am, that is right below your photo, to the left of the green share screen button, that chat. Simply write in there and I can see your message. As we near the 30-minute portion, I'll write a message to you all asking for questions, and I will bring you into the chat. We'll unmute your video so you can talk directly with Casey and Claire and ask those questions. But before I give it over to Casey, I just want to thank you for being here and to ask, if possible, to help and support Guildhall by donating on our website or by simply following us on all our social media and sharing all the wonderful programs that we have been doing. So again, thank you, and I will hand it over to Casey.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We so appreciate you spending your time with us this late afternoon. I'm really excited about this conversation and so thrilled that Claire Watson has agreed to join me. Again, my name's Casey Deline. I'm the curatorial assistant at Guildhall Museum in East Hampton, New York. Claire is with us. I'm sure you can see her. If you go to the gallery view, you can kind of scroll and see everyone. But if you stay in speaker view during our talk, you'll see whoever's speaking and be able to see what Claire's showing us or whoever's screen is up at that time. So to really get to be able to see the images we're going to show you and her studio, etc., I would definitely keep your screen in speaker view as much as you can. Claire has a really lovely website if you're interested in looking more at her work. It's www.clairewatson.net. She's also on Instagram as @ClaireWatsonStudio. I have been aware of Claire's work for a long time and a fan, but when I saw her most recent piece in our Artist Members exhibition this year, I was really taken aback and decided to dive a little deeper into her as an artist and her body of work. And I became enraptured with that exploration. Just to give you a little background on Claire, I think a lot of you know her very well, actually. But for those of you who don't, she grew up in Amarillo, Texas. Her BFA was in painting from the University of Texas at Austin. Her master's her MFA is in sculpture from the Tyler School of Art in Rome and Philadelphia. She's done quite a few residencies, and she has a very long resume. I'm just going to highlight a few things, but to learn more, obviously, go to her website. It's pretty extensive and wonderful. She has a scheduled residency at the Watermill Center, supposed to be this year, 2020, but again, to TBD on many things right now, but what a lovely honor to be selected for that. She had a residency at the Saltonstall Foundation of the Arts in 2019, a studio residency at Mass MoCA in 2018. She was awarded a fellowship in sculpture from the New York Foundation of the Arts in 2007 and a Pollock Krasner Foundation grant in 1990. She's had exhibitions. Most recently, she showed at Elay Arts in Amagansett in 2019. She showed at Site Brooklyn in Brooklyn, New York, the Blue Star Contemporary Art Museum in San Antonio, Texas, the Southampton Art Center, and the Islip Art Museum. She's been living in Watermill since 1996 here on Long Island and has raised 2 sons with her husband, who is also an artist, Stephen Laub. So Claire, how have you guys been faring? How has sheltering with your family been? And how has it sort of changed the dynamic in your home recently?
Well, it's enriched the dynamic, really. Before I forget, I just want to thank you for inviting me to do this, Casey. I'm looking over at you and your little box over there. Thank you so much, and thanks to everybody for coming. Yeah, we've adapted pretty easily, Stephen and I did, to having our sons home because it's wonderful for us to have them here. I think it's been pretty disruptive for them to have to leave job and school in New York City and come home. But we're just grateful that they could do it, and that we are able to get outside and go to the beach and cook together. And we've adapted pretty well. And I think in a way, maybe because we travel well together. We have always enjoyed, even, I mean, since they've become adults, we've continued to enjoy traveling together. And this is like that in a way. You know, you just, unexpected things come up and you just adapt.
Yeah.
So
Your sons are what, in their mid-20s?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting how sort of these, you know, young adults have now moved back in with their parents to shelter because they are living in metropolitan areas, and how it's a different time. It's a different dynamic. I know even people my age who are in their mid-30s with small children are moving in with their parents as well, just for the help, for the camaraderie. Families are really coming together right now, which is actually a really beautiful thing. Great. Well, good. I'm glad you guys have been faring well. I'm sure everyone wanted to know that. And it's also interesting how our personal lives are coming into play at this time. We're all home probably watching this right now from our homes, doing so much from our homes. So that dynamic and that area is definitely a part of the conversation. Well, let's look at some images of your work. Where are you right now, Claire, sitting in your home? Tell us a little bit about your studio situation.
Our studio situation changed as a result of all of us, 4 adults living and working here. It's not an especially large house, and it's an open plan, and our bedrooms are tiny. So, and it's just the bedrooms, and then open living room and dining room and the kitchen are all connected. So I packed away the things that were in my basement studio. Stephen's studio is in an outbuilding with a wood shop and other things. So his studio has remained intact. But I decided to put things away because we really needed more space. Our younger son was finishing school online, and so I'm in the living room of our house, and I've set up a workspace in the corner next to my desk. I just moved another little table in, and I've actually really been enjoying sitting at the window, coming up from the basement and sitting in the sunshine, or most days it's been sunshiny. And so maybe this will be a semi-permanent arrangement. We also brought out the ping pong table downstairs, and we just needed a little more common space so people could have different places to go to. I'll show you this in a bit.
Yeah, towards the end, Claire will show us around her workspace, as well as a lot of the artwork she has up around the house and in the basement in her previous studio space towards the end. But in the meantime, Claire's put together a really beautiful PDF of her work that we'd love to use to dive into it. Anthony has control over the PDF. Anthony, do you want to share your screen and start with the first slide, please? Thank you so much. This is the piece that Claire has at Guildhall right now in our exhibition. She submitted it along with 435 artists to our artist members exhibition that we do every year. It's an open call to artists. There's no jury, and artists from all over the area submit. As far as the tri-state area, you have to be able to bring your work to Guildhall. So it does sort of create a geographical limitation to who comes to the show. But we get a lot of artists, and it's a wonderful, they're all members of Guildhall, and we open it to them to show their work once a year. And we have a juror come in and jury the show, a curator from another institution. Actually, on this call right now is Christina Strassfield, our museum director and chief curator. She curates the 435 artworks in the show. It's a very, very impressive undertaking. And she does a phenomenal job of reaching out to other curators and institutions in New York and beyond to get a curator to come out and jury the show. So we award around, the curator, the guest curator, awards around 17 artists in the show. And this year was Susan Thompson from Associate Curator at the Guggenheim, which was really great. So it was a great year for this show. It is now, we're obviously closed right now, but the show is there, living on. It's also available online. So you can view every piece online. Pricing and availability is up there as well for shopping the show. We do sell the work. And you can do a virtual tour. I did a virtual tour just before we closed. I snuck in my top picks. We do a Museum Monday, usually a in-person tour, but I did it via video. And when Claire was one of the artists I really wanted to highlight on my tour, I just picked 7 pieces and went around and talked about them. Again, like I said, I wasn't super aware of her work. I hadn't dived that deep into it yet, but this piece really struck me. And Claire, I'll talk about how it struck me, and then I want you to really talk about where this came out from your perspective, obviously. It's a square canvas with white gesso. That white square you see is a white paint gesso. And then in the middle is a leather that's been inserted in the canvas. She's stitched that piece into the canvas. It's not on top, within it, cut out. And at first, when you see it, it's very abstract, minimal. I think it's very calming, serene. But as you approach and get closer, you see this stitching and this process that is so intense and labor intensive. Not a single pucker or issue with the construction. It's so well done. And then you start to notice the texture of the central black object shape, and it's leather. And as you read the medium, you're sort of even more entranced by what's happening beyond that in the work. So leather on canvas. And then this embossment process, which you can see the leather has yet another texture within it. And one of the parts of the medium is lentils, I believe. I don't think it says that here, Claire, but you can, yeah, she's nodding. So yeah, lentils. And I just assumed those were the small circular bumps that were around the middle. To me, this looks sort of like a head, sort of the shape of I see like a chin coming out and coming around like a neck. Again, that's just my reading of this abstract piece. And then this circular lentil aspect of it, and the leather. So referencing the body, skin, and then this sort of circle of a seed, like a life, beginning of life, in the center as well. So Claire, this is a piece from 2019. So this is a recent-ish body of work. Why leather? Why, all these beautiful materials?
Well, this is one of the pieces that I started when I was doing the residency at the Saltonstall Foundation. And my project, I was there just 2 weeks, and my project was to, I thought I would make a piece every day, but of course it was more like a piece every other day. Or I ended up with about 7 small canvases, and my idea was to try something different, a different technique in each one. With the series is called Remains, because all of these leather pieces are intact garment pattern pieces that are left over from other projects that they were not incorporated into other larger pieces, and or they were remnants from larger pieces that had that I considered to have failed somehow. I took them apart with the seam ripper and salvaged the pieces to reuse. So they're smaller. That's the pieces, the remnants themselves are much smaller than them. We'll pretty soon see the 2018 series that was at Elay Arts, where I was using more of the intact leather garment. But these are portions of the leather garments stitched together. In some cases, they're boiled. In a lot of cases, the leather's been boiled to shrink it somewhat and to alter the texture or to heighten the texture of the surface. And then, yes, they're inset and into canvas, and that's one of the reasons there are so many remnants. There was a very high failure rate in the beginning. It took me a really long time to learn how to do this, and so I just kept doing it, kept making the pieces over and over again and reusing the portions that I could salvage. But all of the shapes are pattern pieces. I mean, those I consider the found objects, like in other words, I did not alter the outline or the silhouette of the leather that came out of the garment I disassembled. And the project was to make, to create an abstraction based on those, shapes. So.
Sure. So the leather is coming from found objects.
Yes.
That you collect and then repurpose in this way, deconstruct, reconstruct into these abstract pieces. They're stunning. The color is phenomenal too, that these found objects have these such strong color relationships to one another. And with
turquoise leather pants is pretty phenomenal. For a leather jacket, that's pretty amazing color for a pair of pants. And likewise, the pink shape in the next image was from a leather jacket. I thought was pretty amazing.
It really says, what these accessories, express to a person in the life they lived prior to now being incorporated in your work. How these fashion choices shape who we are as well. It's a bit. I
can't remember what these pattern shapes, like where in the garment those, it was some part of the bodice, but I just thought it was really interesting that there was a black leather jacket and a different pink leather jacket that had that same shape, completely different jackets. But I just thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. Those integral puzzle pieces in making a garment tend to be similar throughout the different manufacturers, etc. Very nice, very cool. Here's another one with some circular elements as well.
The circular elements in that piece are actually the edge of gesso. The gesso is applied kind of thickly to the canvas, except in those areas. You can't see that detail in these images, but if you see them in person, there's a very distinct edge between the thick gesso and then the thinner canvas area that's the circles.
Wow, it's beautiful. Again, such great shapes. Now with this one, I think we briefly talked about it. These are applied on the surface instead of integrated into the canvas like the others.
Yeah, there is some applique in some of the other pieces where I've, for example, stitched the green shape onto the black shape to make one piece, and then that's inset, or the pink and black was the same thing, but these are basically appliqued onto the gessoed canvas. So I stitched through the canvas. These are bodice portions of leather jacket bodices, more than one jacket, I believe. And then I sectioned them into diagonals. So it's hard to tell, maybe a little bit hard to tell where the original pattern pieces are, but I didn't rearrange them. I didn't cut up the jacket piece. The jacket pattern pieces are still intact in their outlines, but the section just created it. And I was looking at this piece the other day and thinking that the edges, this is one of the last pieces I've made before I started working on drawings and sort of thinking ahead. But I think I'm thinking a little bit in this piece about returning to the shaped canvases that we'll see, the shaped panels that we're going to see in a little bit. Also, I had broken my wrist in early January, and there were it was surprising the things that I could do with the cast and the things that I could not do. And somehow punching through the canvas was something that I could do with either hand, even with the cast, but I somehow couldn't coordinate working on the sewing machine. So that was another reason for trying this. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I don't know if anyone on the call has worked with leather in this capacity. I have attempted to reconstruct an old jacket at one point, and it is incredibly difficult. The needles are incredibly sharp, and is your sewing machine special for this, or can you just hook up a different needle to a regular sewing machine? Do you have like a leather sewing machine?
Sorry, I think, yeah, I use a leather needle, but it's just a domestic sewing machine, and not even a great one, really. It's just...
You like to work for it. Make it a little harder. Oh, that's amazing. That's interesting that you could actually, with your broken wrist, punch down easier than it was to use the machine and feed through the machine. All right, let's talk a little bit more about where leather came from for you. We're going to jump back on the next slide to some much earlier work. Well, yeah, 2012. And talk about this sort of pipe shape, and then how leather found its way into your dialogue.
Okay, so this, I did a series of works, and this year in 2012, up to maybe 2014, in which I was revisiting a much, much earlier series that was based on, I've pretty much always worked with found objects, and I was looking back at a very early series I did that was all tobacco pipes. So that's where the pipe shape, this is actually a pipe case that I've covered with glove leather. Between the tobacco pipe series and this series, I had worked for a number of years using kid leather gloves, which I discovered as sort of a corollary to the tobacco pipe somehow in my mind. When it was like, okay, what's next? And I had been making a discrete sculpture for every pair of gloves or single glove that I had, and I began to want to combine the gloves and the tobacco pipes. Of course, this is different because there's a glove leather and a pipe, and the next one is a glove and another found object, which is a porcelain doll's head. And this I made by dropping the leather glove, stretching the leather glove over the full-size leather glove over the porcelain doll's head and dropping it in boiling water. And that's what happened.
Wow.
So around the head and
around it. Wow. That's a really powerful piece. Very powerful. Very cool. And leather, you were just naturally attracted to the found leather objects you were finding and to incorporate them?
Well, I was really attracted to the idea of using gloves because, like tobacco pipes, they are such personal objects that are also like appendages to the body in a way. They're like extensions of the body. They're personal, they're collected, they somehow, well, a lot of personal objects do retain some impressions of their former owners, and they, for me, evoke really interesting histories. That's I think why found objects interest me, but leather particularly, really, you really do see the signs of wear, the smudges, they're broken in, they've been loved and used. But even beyond that, if you think about the origin and what leather is, to me, that is really interesting. There's so many associations, and there's so much attached to the material that that's what intrigues me.
That I find that so compelling about the material as well. The life it lived when it was an animal, and then the life it lived on in a garment. I think that's why leather is such a popular fashion material, is it does form to the body, and as you wear it, it wears in and gets better with age, and conforms to your shape and your anatomy. So what an interesting material to be doing this with. And now you're conforming it to yet another anatomy in your work. And these sculptures are very powerful. That's amazing. That's a great one. Sort of holding the pipe in its embrace. All right, let's go, Anthony, on to the, some of these works where you can really see that glove shape referenced pretty clearly, and yet a lot of other really interesting forms are coming through as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about this series?
Sure. So I had acquired quite a collection of gloves, and people were giving them to me, and I really had a nice collection, and so many. I mean, I could have gone on really indefinitely making the small sculptures, but I started to be really interested in working on a slightly larger scale and in using the gloves together in some way, like in repetition, in some sort of repetitive form. So when I started opening the gloves along their seams and flattening them out, this was a surprise. I mean, I didn't know that they were going to become mask-like shapes. So that was that was a surprise that I enjoyed. And so I've did a number of pieces in this series, and I'm not sure I'm finished with it. I mean, I think it's something that I want to revisit.
And the eyes are the thumb.
That's the thumb, the opening for the thumb piece. That's an entirely different shape. The very first one, Anthony, do you mind going back? The four white shapes that are at the top and bottom, with the top two, those are the thumb pieces. That's the shape of the thumb piece that gets inserted into the what became the eye in the mask.
Wow, I love the positive and negative shapes in this piece. I think the white, I don't know, you go back and forth between the white and the black and wanting to say one's in front of the other or is the foreground. And I love your play with that negative space. It's like, oh wait, that's also a hand. They're puzzle pieced together in such a way it's very dynamic, those two. That's beautiful. And all the different appliques and different colors of leather, the embroidery, you can see all these fashion choices that were made in the construction of the original piece. So this one is sort of floating. It doesn't have it's not attached to there's holes in it, like literal air space.
Yeah. It is floating off of a muslin ground. But yes, it's separated, it's detached a little bit from I can't remember how I did that. I think there may be buttons or something that are behind it that are attaching it to the linen. So it lifts off the ground a little bit.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, Anthony, some more of these combinations. This one, again, that floating sculptural wall hanging element. And now the leather here is so distressed and curly. Is that the boiling process that you've been?
That was boiling I dropped these gloves one at a time into a big pot of boiling water, just a little kitchen experiment, and that's what resulted. I mean, I could have tacked them and stretched them and preserved their shape maybe in some way, but I liked that they distorted.
Yeah. All right, Anthony, let's go to the next one. Okay. So this is a newer series that sort of came from the previous work we were just looking at. This is the series of work that Claire exhibited at Ely Arts this past year. And it's called The Thing Is this series? Is that right, Claire?
It is. And it was, it culminated, the series culminated in a show at ELA Arts in actually 2018. So, yeah. And these pieces came about just as a result of my, after working on having flattened out the glove pieces and creating those pieces with the repeating shapes that were the gloves, I just started wondering what it would be like to work with full-size leather garments, sort of referencing the body entire, using pants and coats were the easiest things to find. And I boiled them because my studio wasn't really large enough to work in repeating motifs on that scale. So partly they did shrink a little bit to a more manageable size. But again, I liked the way the texture changed, or the accidents that happened.
And once again, the way you're activating, excuse me for interrupting, once again, the way you're activating the negative space in these works is really brilliant.
So these are mounted onto shaped plywood panels. That's the difference between these and the more recent series that are stretched around stretcher bars. These were sewn through or stitched to thin plywood panels that are on cleats on the wall, so they stand off of the wall a little bit and cast shadows. So the negative space that you're looking at in this series of images is the white wall.
Well, this is a large piece. It's 52 by 40 inches. So just to give you guys an idea of scale, they may all be on the same size slide right now, but they're definitely not all the same size. And Claire will give us a little walk around and you'll be able to see some of these in situ soon. This one's beautiful with the two color, black and white. So interesting. And again, are you maintaining the shapes from the fashion garment with these as well? Yeah.
This was 2 pairs of leather jackets, or a leather, at least a black leather jacket bodice piece, and actually I think remnants of a white leather coat.
Yeah, and I think as a 2-color abstract sculptural piece, they are extremely successful. The dynamic shapes, the way they activate the negative space. But then again, as you explore your work and get deeper, this whole level of leather and where these shapes are coming from, there's 2 really incredible layers to your work to explore in the pieces. All right, are we back to the first image, Anthony? Great. So which brings you to the sort of current body of work, or the most recent body of work, is those stretched canvases, where instead of on a plywood sort of wood frame where you're stretching the leather, you're now using it in a canvas.
Right.
Just beautiful.
Right.
And
Insetting it, I think it's called an inset panel. I was not that much of a sewer before I started these works, but yeah, maybe downstairs I'll show you the back of one.
Sure. Oh, the back of this one, when we were installing it, it was very impressive. Very impressive. Okay, Anthony, let's look at sort of what you've been working on now. Talk to us a little bit about, since quarantine and all, and I know beyond that, but what you're working on now that your space has changed a little bit, and how you're looking towards the future of your work. Well,
these are gouache drawings, or small gouache paintings on paper, gouache and collage. And it's a way of working through ideas for variations on the pieces. But the shape, so they refer to, for example, in this one, the black shapes they refer to pieces of black leather that I have that I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with next. And I when also for the Elay Arts show, I did a number of gouache drawings or sort of variations for each piece, because what I found was that once attached to the plywood mount, it was very hard to salvage materials if I wasn't happy with the result. So I would do is, you know, and the finished piece doesn't always look anything like any of the preliminary drawings or studies, but I think of these as studies, just working through thoughts. But the shapes refer to actual leather shapes that I have that I'm working with. I sort of, you know, approximate the color and the shape. And
So these are wood and gouache paper with gouache. Is that what you said?
Well, that's wood. That's wood veneer.
Okay, veneer.
Strips of wood veneer on paper with gouache collage. Gouache and collage. Gouache on paper collaged with wood veneer. And I guess I'm thinking about, and again, the shapes refer to leather pattern pieces that I have that I'm, you know, rearranging. I arrange them in different ways on my floor and look at them and then create different drawings. But there's just thoughts about combining the methods of stitching the leather to canvas, because I like that transition between materials from the leather to the canvas and with applied gesso, and I like the stitching as almost sort of a drawing element. But what I am missing a little bit, or what I would like to see again, is the shaped ground, the shaped mount. So these are ideas about combining the stitched leather with canvas, but stretched around maybe a shaped plywood panel rather than around a square or rectangular stretcher bar.
So really taking that sort of, that square or rectangular stretcher bar format and pushing it a little further and marrying those two series that you've done into a shaped canvas. I think that's great. I love seeing the materiality of that stitch work that you do in the canvas pieces that you don't see as much of in the wood backed pieces like from the Elay Arts exhibition. So I think a marriage of the two is a really beautiful direction. We get the best of all Claire Watson worlds in one piece. That's great. Oh, thank you. And thank you, Anthony, for going through the slideshow for us. Well, okay, we're doing good on time, but before we get too far along, and we do want to answer questions and have people be able to comment. So in about 10 minutes. So Claire, do you want to just give, if you don't mind, showing us around your workspace and then down to the basement so we can see some of the scale of some of these works?
All right, so I'm just going to turn you around so that you can see where I've been sitting, which is in the corner of my living room here. Oh, can you see?
Yeah, we can. Aim it a little kind of lower than you probably think. Yeah.
Because I can't quite see what you're looking at unless I stick my head around. But anyway.
What a tremendous view and natural light.
The light is very green right now, but I really am enjoying working in the daylight. So that's my little setup.
And are you mainly working on the studies right now, like not doing as much sewing at the moment?
I'm sorry, I hope this isn't making people dizzy. I don't know what that's like, being carried around. But this is a little cart there with my stuff. And yeah, I'm perfectly happy. And my family is very tolerant of the mess in that corner. And I guess I'm going to walk. This is the room that I'm in.
We can see a bit of your work on the walls there as well, but that's all right. We'll go down and go where most of it is.
All right, here we go. See, nothing's very far.
That's good. It's very convenient.
All right. So this is, okay, I'm going to have to see. All right. So there's the piece we were looking at a little earlier.
Yeah, very, very large. I mean, obviously we had the measurement, but it's so nice to see it. And
this is a space that, is often where I have worked to do drawings, but has become a sort of a common workspace right for now.
Yeah.
And
People can see the display that you use for them. Some are floating, some are framed.
Studio, when I'm really working down here, the studio looks nothing like this. This is very staged right now, very very, very, very cleaned up, and everything's put away. The ping pong table is even put away. It's on wheels, so we rolled it out of the way for this.
Love that piece.
Is this good?
It is good. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to give you a.
Wow. Those are great.
So you've got a 360 there of the space, and
it's amazing. Look how big that one is. So the one right behind you, this blue, red, and black piece is that pants? Is that what you said earlier?
pairs of pants.
Pants.
And
it's huge. It's beautiful.
And they stretch. They shrank by literally about half. But the piece that is about. Well, I guess you can see the scale of it, but it's about 30 inches high by 93 or something inches wide. Is this? But it would have been twice that big had I not shrunk the leather. So.
Yeah. Wow. Do you find the leather more manageable when it's been boiled and shrunk like that? Is it?
Not always, but it's unpredictable what's going to happen. I think it depends upon how it's been tanned. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it gets very rubbery. Some of the kid leather gloves got really stiff, like rawhide almost. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it gets just very rigid, like saddle leather, even though it didn't start out that way, So, but I like that. I like not knowing what's going to happen.
Sure. Well, we have some questions coming through that we could address down here. Anthony, does anybody want to be brought on to speak and be unmuted, or should I read some of these? What's the?
I am reaching out to a few people right now to see if they would like to join in and ask their question. But if anyone does have a question, do type it right into the chat. And if you'd like us to unmute your video for you to pop in, we're happy to do so.
Sure. I have another question if you want me to fill, of course,
great.
a little time. Claire, what do you have any artists that influence you, or that you have that inspire your work, that you reference when you're working?
Oh, that's such a great question. And there are so many artists that are working with textiles and or working with clothing or costume that I think are really, really interesting. But among those, some of my favorites. Beginning with Louise Bourgeois, of course, I love. And she's someone who's been very influential. But I also look a lot at. I love all kinds of art, and I'm very interested in process-based art that kind of requires that you look at it and study it a little bit to try to understand the decisions that the artist made to arrive at a certain place in the painting or the sculpture or assemblage or whatever. I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with the list of artists that I love, but I spend a lot of time when I love to go to the Met when I'm in New York City. And so I really also love looking at ancient art and textiles and tapestries. And so let me
think about it. Yeah.
Let me come up with a better answer, in a few minutes.
I definitely think of Louise Bourgeois when I see your work, for sure. The materiality and the fleshy, disembodied parts and things. It's very, very similar. Anthony, do you want me to throw any of these questions out?
I am going to bring Andrea into the conversation. So
Right.
Andrea, I'm going to unmute your video.
This is Andrea Grover, the executive director of Guildhall.
I'm not sure which Andrea this is. I can't.
Oh, we don't know which Andrea this is. Sorry. Maybe it's Andrea Coate. She's also on here.
To talk.
Well, they'll hear you if you.
Hi. That's Krista and Mark.
Andrea should be unmuted.
Yeah, I just unmuted. Yeah, I was wondering, Claire, if you could talk about surrealism in your work, and your inspiration from that. Yeah.
Well, that's also a great question. And I am in love with, surrealism, and it has been a real influence in earlier work, such as the one that's behind you in your space.
Yeah, nice background, Andrea.
And that early tobacco pipe series that we haven't looked at the early pieces, but they really started as a result of looking at the painting by Magritte, La Trahison des Images, which is the Ceci n'est pas une pipe.
Yeah.
I love the contradiction and paradox in that, and the titles, and even in the 2012 series that we were looking at, Conundrums, and which I was combining the gloves and tobacco pipes, titles were very important, and I'm often using human hair or
Yeah. I was thinking of Marat Oppenheim a lot in your work, with the wrapping of different objects and the stretching and this sort of playful quality.
I think that didn't come immediately to mind because in the work that I'm doing currently, I think I'm thinking less about titles and less about narrative, or in fact, the current titles are just really sort of descriptive, whereas language and titling was much more important in the series from 2012 and earlier. So I think, I don't know whether I'll return to that kind of, those literal references again in my work or not. I seem to be heading in a more reductive fashion towards simpler imagery, and well, I don't know if that's a very good answer to your question but I will always love surrealism, and a number of surrealist work who definitely have influenced my work in that series.
Thank you, Andrea. That was a great question. Anthony, anybody else want to come up and ask a question, or I can?
Yeah, we have a question from Ellen Frank, and she asks if Claire can discuss symmetry in her work and her attraction to it, and perhaps the female form which seems to hover as a presence in there.
Interesting. I think Christina Strassfield was also interested in the mirror image symmetry that you use. So yeah, talk about that.
Well, I think that it is there because we are symmetrical. And I'm talking right now, I'm referring to the more recent work and not the work that had maybe more surrealist elements in it. But the works that, whether they're the flattened glove pieces from the Now What series, the black and white gloves, or the larger pieces that are constructed from leather coats and pants, sometimes skirts and things like that, but they are inherently symmetrical. There's a left leg and a right leg. And so I think I go back and forth between, sort of insisting on that symmetry and wanting to disrupt it or defeat it somehow. And so I think the pieces from I guess I'm calling them remains, the pieces that were the smaller ones that are constructed on the stretched canvas from remnants of garment pieces. In a lot of cases, I think I was interested in trying to disrupt the symmetry, trying to do something, or just maybe one central shape but the symmetry gets in.
Definitely.
I feel like it's hard to do. I feel like if I do just the left leg, I've got, but wait, it's not whole, because I am interested in, at least subliminally somehow, the referencing the body, although I'm not interested in doing it so literally. I don't know if everyone recognizes garment patterns I think you do. I think maybe you do see that it refers to a piece of clothing, even if you don't know the pattern shape, if you're not a sewer. But anyway.
Yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
No, I have nothing.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to bring up somebody else, which is fine. But yeah, like, I don't know. I think even at least for young girls, the doll clothes and dressing like paper doll type of toys that were given to girls at a young age, those definitely, you see the patterns and how those are put together. So that's very interesting. I know there was another, someone brought up femininity in your work.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the female body.
Yes. Well, I think that it's inevitable, because since I am a woman, and I do work with women's clothing, not men's. I have not yet done any pieces that are based on, it may not be as easy to find, men's clothing, men's leather clothing in the colors that attract me,
We do have Ellen to join in, who was asking that question.
Sure.
Oh, Ellen, I'm going to go find you now. Or Ellen, Frank, if you are on, you can unmute yourself. You will pop right into the conversation. Here.
Hi, Ellen. Oh.
Hi, Casey. Hi, Claire. Such gorgeous work, Claire. I want to just burst into tears at its beauty. So I'm noticing more and more a sensuous, an implicit, what I was saying, a hovering female figure. I've been seeing a presence more in shape and curves, and so that you make, that aren't necessarily shapes within the leather themselves. So I was wondering if you could speak about that.
I think I know what you're referring to in the shaped canvases, the negative spaces that are in the wall behind. You're referring to that in part, I think. And I don't know if I can explain it. I mean, it's not necessarily, I'm not deliberately thinking those thoughts as I'm making the pieces, but I just know that, there's a certain thing that I'm looking for, that I want to see. Some of that is worked out in the drawings, and some of it happens, just working directly with my hands on the materials. But what the way that the pieces come about usually is that I lay the pattern pieces out on the floor and arrange them and rearrange them. Sometimes I take pictures of them so that I can remember a certain configuration. And then I often go to the drawing table and start it really in sort of a dollhouse scale or paper doll fashion. I cut out the shapes that I actually have. I paint the paper the color that I need, and then cut out the shapes as if it's a little paper doll figure. And then I play with those for a while until I come up with the configuration that I'm looking for. I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then we have, I think, time for one more from Cheslin Amato, who I believe is a former classmate of yours, Claire.
Hi, Claire. I have, always adored Claire's work. What I'm going to do is, just as I was listening, I have a lot of words. I'm just going to say them to share them. So architecture and huts, design and artisanry. I have elegance and awkwardness, beauty and beast, establishment and terror, playful and threatening, beauty and death. I have decadence. And so that's that double entente, but like even multiple entente, which goes with the contradictions and the paradox. You know, to me, I say these are such erotic things. I mean, they are so powerfully so. And then I noticed in, I think, apéritif, that's like a Nike thing, you know, turned in on itself. So this kind of like subtle sense of appropriation in a way. And then you also have, I think, the sovereign and the fool kind of thing. And finally, in that, it was interesting, you know, talking about titles and untitled. So I see you, in a sense, lineages-wise, you know, there's kind of this Solowit and Ellsworth Kelly element. And then people mentioned it, but the Magritte and the Merritt Oppenheim, but also intensely for me, the Marcel Duchamp. And I even put in there something like the Francis, like White Reed, but the kind of inside-outside piece. And just so a little bit of something.
Yes,
Thank you so much, Claire. And always the madeness of your work, your craft. I mean, the way that you relate to materials to me is, you know, the essential draw of the work. It's just so deeply tactile and made and causes great joy.
Thank you, Chaz. So good to see you.
Yes, so good to see you too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Cheslin, where are you?
Oh, I live in Davis, California, where I've been for about 15 years. I was in Chicago for 20 before that, and I am also a actively practicing also.
Yeah, Claire, thank you so much for joining us from all the way. The lovely thing about this is we can actually be together all over the world. Instead of a gallery talk at Guildhall that you would not normally be able to make it to, we can have this conversation across the country. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for your words. Those were beautiful. I just wanted to say one last thing about Claire's work. The process she goes through to get to the finished product, the life lived of the materials that she uses, the history of the materials, the scratches and scars in the leather, the smell of tobacco or perfume, all of that life, she then takes, manipulates, reconfigures, reconstructs, deconstructs, reconstructs, boils, stretches. I mean, just the intense process to her work creates this object that is so beautiful and peaceful in a way because of its abstract nature and thought-provoking, meditative. And I just think, especially at a time like now, I think we can all relate to that so strongly as we are all trying to take this world and our time and reconstruct it moving forward in a beautiful way. And I think that we can all learn a lot from that and be inspired by that from this conversation and moving forward. Anyway, that's just the one last thought. So thank you so much, Claire, for joining us and agreeing to do this. I know you're not a huge fan of public speaking, and I really appreciate you opening your home, your heart, your artwork to all of us on this call. Thank you so much.
I can't thank you enough. And thanks to Guildhall for the wonderful programming that you're doing from, films, cooking classes, art classes, virtual studios, virtual studio visits with Christina. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, we are, right now, all we can think about is everyone and how everyone's doing and how can we help and how can we be there? How can we support our artists? And you support us just by being able to rattle off that list of things we're doing right now means you're really paying attention to Guildhall and you care, and that you're very involved, and you always do the artist members show, and it's a wonderful to always see your work and be able to see you and everything. And everyone on this call, thank you so much. Great to see everyone. I know so many of the names of people that have joined, and even though we can't bump into each other at art openings and gallery talks and gallery openings, we can all still attempt to have a semi-meeting and come together and gather in this Zoom format, which is not ideal, but it's what we got. So we're making it work. Thank you, Claire, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Everyone.
And I hope everyone has a great day and stays safe.
All right.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank